Hey there lovelies, it's Sarah Leonard here from acatlikecuriosity.com and welcome to our fireworks week called Creative Spark. So in some of the previous creative challenges, particularly in the very first one, the big canvas that we did in the very first week, I experimented with a different sort of technique using black oil pastels over the top of autumnal colours. Today I've got these little postcard sized pieces. So I've got two pieces of watercolour paper and one little postcard size canvas board piece, and I'm just going to experiment a little bit with a slightly different technique because I wasn't completely thrilled with the one that I did for the previous example, and I just want to try something different to see how it works. So instead of using oil pastels for the black layer, I'm going to use black gesso and then scrape away at it whilst it's still wet. Also, it was very, very hard on my fingernails to get that black oil pastel out. So apologies if any of you have ended up in a kind of funny situation because of that, because it did take me a while to get cleaned afterwards as well. So I'm going to change up the colour scheme. And this is one of those things that you do, I think, when you're trying to get inspired and get started. You might have a little technique that you try that you either like or it doesn't quite work, like the one on the canvas, and then you'll sort of go away and experiment with that slightly differently, sometimes with different mediums like the black gesso that I just mentioned, but sometimes simply enough just by changing the colour scheme. So I'm going to use a more bluey greeny kind of colour scheme because we are looking at fireworks, not necessarily fire, and obviously fireworks come in all kinds of colours. So I'm going to go for blues and greens and purples for these little postcard sizes. It's also good to experiment on different sizes of canvas as well, just because it just gives you a slightly different perspective. So I'm going to tip some of these out into my palette. I've got Green Gold by Golden. Don't need a lot of that because it's very pigmented. I've got Teal by Golden as well. That little shaky, looks like it's settled. So I'm just putting these out. You can't see. I'm just putting these out in my palette, my very, very messy palette. Just like I did the last time. And then I've got Crafters Acrylic in Blue Bouquet. And another Crafters Acrylic in Lilac Frost. It's a totally different colour scheme to the one I chose in the previous week. And that can be a good way to just get started with an idea, is to just keep a similar sort of technique maybe, or similar sort of end thought in mind, but just change around the colour scheme and see what that gives you. Can make a real difference, especially sometimes we can get a bit stuck in keeping the colour scheme realistic, and that can be great. Obviously, depending on what you're actually trying to produce, you might need to do that. But swapping and changing things around and coming up with a different colour scheme can be enough to just get that creative spark flowing again. Just move that gesso out of the way. So I definitely recommend doing that. So I'm going to work across all three canvases at the same time, very haphazardly, just like I did before. No kind of plan as to where everything's going to go. I'm just going to add in some of these nice colours that I've chosen. Just see where the wind takes me, really. That's pretty much the idea. That can be quite hard to do sometimes though, I think, especially if you have an end result in mind. Often this kind of experimenting, I end up doing it just in my art journal, because there I don't feel like I'm wasting anything. It doesn't feel like I have to come up with a finished end product type of idea. So it tends to be often the way, although not always. But I think if you can at all, convince yourself to just be a bit brave and a bit experimental and just try things on a little bit. I do think your creativity will thank you for that. In general, it leads you in all kinds of different directions that you maybe never would have thought of otherwise. It's definitely worth allowing your inner child to just take over a little bit and drive the bus for a while and see what happens. Definitely worthwhile. So I'm just really haphazardly covering these little canvases with the little pops of different colours, and I'm letting them blend together on the page. I'm not worried about how and where they'll blend, just being quite free about it all. Making sure that I'm covering up any little patches of white there are on the page. We'll just see what this experiment brings us to. So I'm going to dry all three of these, and then we're going to do a coat of black gesso, and I'm going to use that gesso a bit like I used the oil pastels in the first one. I'm going to try and rub some of that away to create some different designs and let this colourful base layer shine through. But we're going to do that fairly quickly so that the gesso doesn't have a chance to dry, because I want it to still be able to be scraped away, if that makes sense. So let me dry these with my heat gun and then I shall be back. Okay, so these are dry now, and I enjoy that colour combination, those different blues and greens and purples. So I'm going to do a layer of this black gesso over the top of this, and then before it gets a chance to dry, I'm going to try and scrape out a little design in the same way that I did with that first canvas. But I think this might be a little bit more what I was after in the first instance. So let's do the very first one, and let's see, whilst it's still wet, good thick layer. Should have mentioned as well that if you don't have black gesso, you could use just ordinary black paint. So I'm going to try and draw onto here now. Can you see how that blue and the green is shining through? I'm going to draw some kind of fireworky kind of pops of colour and flashes. Although actually, as I say fireworky, I'm more thinking of leaves and plants. I don't know why. It's funny how you sit down with one idea in your mind and then something else comes out all together. But I just want to, whilst it's still wet, just carve out some nice patterns in this black. And I love all the different colours. I don't know how well you can see that on the camera, but all the different shades that are coming through. I think it's a really nice effect. So let's do the next one. Same thing. Oops. This droops down into the depths of the gesso jar. A good thick coat. See, because these are paper, they move around a lot more easily. And then same thing, I'm going to try and I suppose it would depend on what type of brush you used as to what kind of marks you would get, but these really aren't turning out very fireworky at all. This is what happens when you just sort of follow your intuition rather than have a set plan. You can sketch in lots of fireworky markings on yours, I think. These are very abstract if they're fireworky at all. And let's have a go at this last one. But that, to my mind, is the joy of just creating things and experimenting and keeping that creative spark going, is just trying different things and not having a totally set outcome in your mind. I think it just makes for a lot more fun, but also these sort of little happy accidents are things that can then come to be important in other pieces of art that I maybe would do. In the future, I can already see that including some of this kind of etching with highly contrasting colours on a canvas is going to look really good, and something I might want to include in the future. So the good thing as well is, because these are gessoed rather than the oil paints I used before, I can actually use my heat gun and just dry these off. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to dry them off, and I'm going to clean up some of this black, and then I think I'm going to go to town with my metallic pens and some sparkles and different things just to make these pop a little bit more. So let me go away and dry these, and I shall be back. Okay, lovely. So I've dried these now, and I'm quite, I don't know how well they show up on the camera, but I'm quite pleased with the lovely glimpses of colour through the black. I think they look very primitive. I think if I perfected this a little bit more, I would start to perhaps gain a bit more control over what I'm doing. But for now, I'm quite pleased with them as a sort of creative experiment to see what might happen. Let me just adjust this camera. It looks a little bit wonky. Sorry about that. There we are. So I've got hold of my favourite metallic pens. I'm just going to have a go at adding in some extra sparkle and detail with these, just to see what comes of it, really. I've never been very much of a one for working with black backgrounds. That's quite an unusual thing for me. So it's all a bit of a learning curve, and I'm not sure how much I like it, dislike it so far, but it definitely is something that's different, and I do definitely enjoy the metallic pens on the black background there, making me very happy right now. I think that's a big part of just creating, is just allowing yourself to play a little bit, because if you don't, then you never discover anything new, you just have a little set of moves that you do over and over again and that don't really change very much. And I don't know, that's okay, I suppose. If you like what you're creating, that's brilliant. Enjoy yourself, always enjoy yourself, but I think that could be a bit limiting really in terms of finding new things. Just want to put in the word magic there. How readable that is. I'll have to go over it with some white maybe later. I'm definitely enjoying the metallics in this scenario, the little sparkly dots there. Working very well. Let's have a little look. Give this one a little rest from it. Have a look at this one. Like I said before, these are kind of abstract representations based around fireworks, that kind of colourful pops on a night sky sort of idea, but not not in a sort of realistic kind of way, I suppose, more in an abstract kind of way. And I could play all day at just adding in these little dots. It's something I really enjoy. Just putting in a little word. See. Last one. Surprising how much these metallic dots, even the darker colours, actually show up quite well on the black background. putting in some little triangles now, just to do something different and see how that feels. Whether I like it or don't like it. Even though I haven't specifically drawn fireworks on these, they do have a very fireworky feel to them, I think. There's kind of trails through the night sky and flashes. This is just a white gel pen that I'm using now, and just sketchily, in the same way that I would on white paper, I would sketch in outlines of different things. So more is the word that I've put on there, and I have a little idea in my mind now, ways to finish this off. So I want to see more magic. And I'm just kind of sketchily adding in these white lines just to bring about more of a feeling of sort of fireworks popping in the night sky. And the last little thing I want to do is I have these little Crayola glitter glue guns, and I just want to add some extra sparkle here and there. Very haphazardly. And I don't really know, if anyone were to say to me, well, what are these paintings, Sarah? What is it that you've done here today? My honest answer would be, I don't really know, but I've really enjoyed doing it. And I think that's okay. As long as it is the case that you've enjoyed making it, I think that's allowed. So I hope you'll have a little experiment with me and just see, what does it spark off in your mind? What does it make you think, oh yeah, I could do more of that in such a place, or more of this, or maybe I could start doing some more etching on my usual canvases, or maybe this working more on a black background with pens, or whatever it is that springs to mind. Have a little look and see if you can see more magic in your creative ventures. So I hope you've enjoyed this little tutorial, and please do share with me in the Facebook group any pictures that you make using these techniques or thinking about these prompts. I would definitely love to see them, and I shall see you next week with another lovely creative video as well. Thanks so much.